were talking about the great white hope. Americans, all of us, I guess, are always looking for some white savior to come along and save the day for us. And we've seen that happen all too often in lots of genres, lots of areas, and sports is not to be excluded. So, talk to us about why it is that has happened and who some of the examples are that we can look to that bear that out.
It's a great question. And Bill Roden, a wonderful book called $40 Million Slaves, where he gives this kind of really in-depth historical contextualization of exactly where that great white hope kind of dynamic started and how it was also prevalent in Europe. But to kind of, make it a bit more accessible, this idea of eugenics, right? This idea of like gene pools that make certain groups superior and make certain groups inferior has long been the hallmark, not only of American society, but also of sporting cultures. For example, we think about football and why for a long time blacks couldn't play in Division I college and in the NFL. The argument was being made that black people didn't have the temperament, they weren't moral, they weren't ethical enough to be able to participate in those particular kind of sports. And as a result, it wasn't about racism, it was simply that they were inferior in these ways. Then when they did enter into these sports, right? You think about how long it took before we had a black quarterback or a black middle linebacker. That's the quarterback of the defense. Those were in thinking positions. And they said black people didn't have the intelligence to learn the plays or the defensive calls. And of course, translated and who got the coaching jobs. Again, a thinking position or a position. So when we have these kinds of like notions, when we have somebody like a Caitlin come up, and one idea is that there was one white commentator a couple weeks ago, I think, who literally said, shame on the WNBA because the first 4 or 5 games that Caitlin played in, they scheduled her against the best defenses in the WNBA and made her look bad. Shame. I was like, I literally was like, I thought it was when I first saw it, Areva, I thought it was a spoof. I literally thought it was a spoof. And then I realized, no, he's serious. This is the 21st century, and we're literally saying, why didn't the WNBA rig the schedule so that the great white hope could beat out everybody? And like, you guys are talking about the black women? Like, this is just straight up white supremacy. Like, this comes straight out of like Nazi Germany, how people were talking about white people versus black folks. So I think that we have to like contextualize what's happening and stop talking about, oh, revenue this and revenue that. This is about white supremacy, like re-narrativizing what's important, vilifying these black women, and turning like Caitlin into a victim that she's not even responsible. These things are being imposed on her. These narratives have a life of their own. They've been around for a very, very long time.
And that's a great point, David. Sharon, in some ways, Caitlin Clark is a pawn. She's a pawn being used by white supremacists that have an agenda, and that agenda is to villainize black women whenever they can, to subject us to the worst kind of racist gender-based stereotypes, which is what we saw when they talk about this woman Kennedy Carter assaulting, using the word assault in the context of a basketball game. But tell me, now that we know your history, your rich and deep sports history, have you ever seen a situation like this where the player themselves would come out and say, cut it out, guys? This is competitive sports. This is the highest level of competition for women. We don't need to be coddled. I don't need to be coddled. Let's get out there, mix it up, and let the best player win on any given night. Don't set me up for some games for success. Give me the best players to play against, and stop pitting these black women against me. We're all women trying to elevate this sport. Have you ever seen that happen by a white player who's been put in a position similar to Caitlin's?
I can't give you the quote, but I again believe, as much as it pains me to say it, because I grew up a Sixers fan, that Larry Bird said portions of that. He was a beast who just wanted to win. He was sometimes called dirty. He was the biggest trash talker, and that's all he cared about was the ball. Okay, playing basketball and getting the championship win. I do think that if you pay attention to the trolls, and in some cases, the trolls are in the mainstream media. Okay, you would think that the Black women in the WNBA just broke out of prison, okay, and are gang members, and their tax really means something, because that is what we're doing here. And there's another component of it. Because again, they're using words like butch, and we're being told things like, audiences don't want to see those kind of, angry Black women whose sexuality is in question. And remember, we had little articles written in other spots about Caitlin Clark and her beautiful boyfriend and how long they've been together and developing the whole person. She did not ask for any of that. And I do think it's important to note that. I think you're dealing with another, I hate to use that stereotype again, but a female Larry Bird, because the doctor's right. She was doing so much trash talk and antagonizing her opponents. That was her. And that gives us some insight, and God bless her for it. Who cares? This is about competitive basketball. And she's allowed to be all of those things, but it's this American narrative, and yes, white supremacy and even misogyny that wants to keep her in this narrow box and cast everybody else as the villain. And I think we have to resist it. I am disappointed in Stephen A. and other Black men who are attached to the sport who don't even have, I don't believe, any ill will, but they've swallowed the narrative. These female basketball, these women, Black women who built this league have done nothing wrong. And that includes what was upgraded after the fact, 24 hours later, a flagrant foul. That's what it's there for. It's basketball. And sometimes you're going to be on the losing end of that.
Yeah, and Stephen A., we played a clip yesterday where he was called out by a Black woman on his show for not covering Black women or women in general in the WNBA, and now jumping on this bandwagon. What do you say, Ray, about that? There have been other phenomenal Black basketball players in the WNBA, and what I can remember reading stories about them always being attacked for their looks, as Sharon just said, looking too masculine, being attacked for being lesbians to the extent that they were. And this whole narrative around where nobody wants to come to the games to see these, butch looking, dyke looking Black women. And now all of a sudden, even the Black sportscasters that have big platforms like Stephen A. are, eating up the Caitlin Clark. Do you think that we should be calling out some of these guys saying, wait a minute, what about the Candace Parkers of the world, the Lisa Leslie's of the world? Okay, Sharon, I know a couple of names.
There it is. Yes.
What about these Black women? Why weren't they given more attention on Black platforms, at least, even if mainstream sports outlets wouldn't give them attention?
Well, one of the problems is that this is so new to everybody. Even some of the more veteran journalists like myself, I've been around women's basketball for a long time, but I never have been around it on this level of getting this much attention. And so this is different for a lot of journalists to try to adjust to this. And, some things may come out that you may wish you could redo and do a retake on it. But I think there's no ill will on Stephen A.'s part. Yeah. I think the thing with him and Monica that got a little heated was Monica, and I watched the segment, Monica had said she thought, she used the word probably. Maybe there's probably some jealousy from the other players toward Caitlin Clark. But we know that it's way beyond that. There is a fire in a lot of these ladies' hearts to try to upstage her as best they can because they are jealous of her attention, and that's a human nature thing. Wait a minute,
Ray. Are they jealous or they're competitors?
There's both. It's both. Because even before she played her first game, there were a lot of players already chirping about, well, why is she getting all this attention? And she didn't even play her first WNBA game yet. This was going on between her last game at Iowa and the day she got drafted in the WNBA.
But does that happen in the sport whenever you have some hotshot rookie that comes on the scene?
It happens a lot.
We talk about
a lot.
Men being jealous of
it happens a lot. No, it does. It happens a lot. I mean, Michael Jordan went through it. In Michael Jordan's rookie year, they froze him out of the All-Star game because they thought he showed them up during the dunk contest, and there was some rumors going around that nobody wanted to pass to him in the All-Star game. Can you imagine that? Michael Jordan could not get his hands on the ball in an All-Star game. And there's some validity to that. Caitlin Clark probably did not imagine the level of scrutiny that she was going to face. This is a serious upgrade from college for her. She's seeing 8 or 9 players on every team that were All-Americans in college somewhere. So she stepped up big time in competition. So the people who thought she was going to just ease into the WNBA and keep firing these jumpers from the logo and hitting three-pointers everywhere, those days are over. She's going to have to kind of adjust her game a lot more now to get herself free for shots. She's got to work much harder than she did at Iowa, and I think that was not really known when she first came into the league. People should have got her ready for that more than what they did.
Well, welcome to the pros.
I want to talk about, hold that thought, Sharon. When we come forward, I want to talk about this notion of how this concept of jealousy and all these women that you say are jealous of her, is that same standard applied to men with other superstar male players? And then I want to talk about this notion that somehow this level of excitement and interest in the sport is going to translate into women getting bigger contracts so they don't have to go, as you said, overseas, because I have my doubts about that, being a civil rights lawyer and not having seen women reach parity pretty much in any profession in this country. So when we come forward, we'll continue this very interesting and heated conversation about what's happening in the WNBA, particularly around Black and white elite athletes.